Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Wednesday night show. This is the Mountaineer Locker Room Then and Now. I'm Greg Christ, your host for the show. Be bringing Frank Fear in here in just a minute as the other host of the show. I don't want to call him a co-host. He's a host, and I help him. So we'll bring Frank in here in just a minute. But we want to welcome everybody to the show. We think we got another good show lined up for you, as we hope we have in the past. Last week's show was absolutely awesome. If you hadn't got a chance to look at that yet, you may want to go back and check it out. It is archived on YouTube. You can go back and check it out. It was our tribute show to Dale Wolfley, and of course, all of us knew, worked with, or both with him, and we had a fantastic show with his family members, his two sons, and his wife. Joined us, and it was just a great conversation, and brought back a flood of good memories for me, and I know everybody else on the panel, as well as the family, and it was a lot of fun to talk about all that. So we enjoyed that, and we feel like, again, that was a really good show. If you want to go back, check it out, you should. Want to remind everybody, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. That's what keeps us going, is those subscriptions. So please subscribe, and you can watch anytime. You can go back; they're always archived. You can go back and watch them at your leisure, and hopefully enjoy them. We got, again, a good show tonight, we think. We've got a couple guys, one we haven't had on before, one we have. We'll be talking some football. Coach Cliff Hill is going to join us here in just a little bit. He works with high school players and working out their future endeavors with scholarships, NIL type things, and we want to talk to him about the current system now, and what this court ruling from last week on the NCAA, what that means for this NIL thing, and where things are headed. And I think any college football fan who has any interest in the game at all, in the history of the game, et cetera, will be interested in what Cliff has to say. I talked to him yesterday for a good while on the phone, and it was fascinating just to hear, his insights on, what's going on now, how it all works, and what's coming. And I think, and Frank, we'll talk about this too a little bit. I think there's some misconceptions about what actually takes place with these NIL deals and that sort of thing. And he enlightened me on that a little bit yesterday. So I think people will truly be interested in that. I think that's going to be an interesting conversation. We'll have Stone Wolfley with us as well. Stone was on with us last week. He'll be on with us again. And we're going to talk football and NIL and all things related. Typically, first thing we do on the show is we have Darryl Prue on, and he and I do a little basketball talk. Darryl hasn't joined us tonight, so I'm going to drag Frank in here, and me and Frank are going to attempt to talk some basketball. Frank, welcome to the show.
Yeah, replacement for Darryl Prue. Boy, oh boy. Yeah, I played left out. Anyway, good seeing you, buddy.
Yep, hadn't heard that. And I said that, used to hearing you talk about, psychology and dealing with people and all those academic type things. And we'll talk some basketball tonight, though. So you're going to be in my field. So I look forward to that. But, we each week we try to talk about the basketball team and their games. We didn't talk about it last week. So we've had, I think, 3 games since we've actually discussed the basketball team. And, Frank, one of the things that I see and keep seeing is just when you start feeling a little hopeful, they take a step back and then they come back. And I don't know, it's just been up and down, even though, the wins and losses are not up and down, they're mostly down. But the feeling about the team has been up and down. I mean, there's been weeks when I've just been totally disgusted, like, I'm done watching this, and then other weeks I'm like, man, you know what? These guys get it together, they could be okay. But it's really, to me, it's just been a roller coaster ride for this team this season.
Yeah, boy, you, as always, hit the nail on the head. I was one that realized, probably my age, having gone through a number of seasons as a fan, this was going to be a tough year. I mean, there's a lot of talent on the floor, and we were talking before the game. A lot of talent, but they're not necessarily playing well together. Of course, the head coach is getting a lot of the gas for that. But the fact of the matter is, I think what we're seeing is a proverbial tale of two cities. We saw it at Iowa State. West Virginia got way behind, then a rally, and you're saying, wow, they might win this game, and Iowa State lose at home. And that same thing against Kansas State a couple of days later. The game's over. No, it's not.
Right.
And and my wife Kathy and I, who's a WVU alum as well, we were watching that game, and she said, "Hey, they're going to win," and they're up by 3. Sudden, they go back, and that's. I don't get angry because I think this is what happens with teams that hopefully it's the pause that refreshes, and next year we'll see a much better product on the floor.
Yeah. Well, the other game before that, they played UCF, and they won that game, won by 10 points. And my brothers and I went to the game, and I said, you watch a game like that, and you look at the stats. If you didn't know the score, you would think WVU blew them out. And so that was a little concerning because I think, WVU played a zone practically the entire game. Maybe the first part of the game they didn't, but then they went to a 2-3 zone. They stayed in that zone the whole game. UCF played right into their hands and started bombing threes. They took 38 threes. They only made 9 of them, so we're 9 for 38 from the three-point line. West Virginia shot 50% from the three-point line. They shot 50% from 2, and you look at that alone and think, man, we must have killed them. But we ended up winning by 10, and it was probably a little closer than that 10. And sitting there watching the game, it just seemed like we were just, I told my brother at one point, I said, I feel like we should be up by 20 right now. So that was that kind of game. And then, that zone worked really well. And I thought, well, maybe he found something there, because one of their big problems has been defending people. And we've struggled mightily defending people. And I thought maybe he's found something with this zone that they can handle. They don't have to have quite the depth, that you need to run a man-to-man. Maybe he found something. So in the Iowa State game, cruised along pretty good. We had a 1 or 2 point lead there, and then all of a sudden Iowa State goes on a 14-0 run, and we just kind of fell apart. And you look at the score, 71-64, and you think, wow, maybe we played pretty good defense. And they played a lot of zone in that game too, and I think that kept them in the game. But they just couldn't score, and offensively they struggled. Then you go to the next game, and offensively they seem fine, but they can't stop Kansas State from scoring. And we got way down in that one. And I know you was talking about Kathy said we might win. I got a text from somebody that said we're down 2 or something. I forget what right at the beginning. Playing pretty well. And then the next text I got was halftime, we're down 20, I'm done. And I'm watching the game, we start chipping away, and Timothy got a great point there. Turnovers been a big factor in us losing, and he's exactly right. And the turnovers just about every game have absolutely killed us. And even in the Iowa State game, we had a ton of turnovers in that game, and that's been a real struggle. I think defensively, and the turnovers have just been they can't overcome all that. And they're a pretty good, really, I think a pretty good offensive team. They score, for the most part, except when they're turning the ball over like that. Of course, when you turn the ball over, you don't get shots. And I talked to one of my friends the other day, text message back and forth with Joe Mazzulla, and we were talking about one of their games, and he said, well, basically we got up 22 more shots than they did. And he said, when you do that, you're going to win. And he's right, and you look at the Iowa State game, we just didn't get up enough shots because we turned it over too many times. And so that's what's happening there. Another thing, and I'll quit rambling on here, but something I noticed in the Kansas State game, the last 2.5, 3 minutes of regulation, and then the first 3 minutes of overtime, Raekwon Battle never touched the ball, and he was 4 for 6 from the 3, and from a 2, it was around 50%. I mean, he'd been balling all night, and then all of a sudden he just quits getting the ball. And in overtime, I'm sitting there thinking, why is he not touching the ball? And finally, when he did touch it, he hit 2 more threes, kept us in the overtime period. So I think there's some issues there too as well that these players got to know. Somebody's got the hot hand, you got to find him and get him the ball. And he makes tough shots, and he's one of the few people we have that can create his own shot, score off the dribble and create his own shots. And he was doing that very well the other night, but then he just quit getting it. So that's a problem too.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct. That I noticed the same thing, and I looked at the stats, and one of the things about his jump shot, and it was one of the announcers talked about it the other night. He gets up so high and he moves back, so he's literally very difficult, if not impossible, to defend him. He can get that shot off, and he's one of those players that can move and hit. That's not easy, as you know. Usually, and you teach not to move when you're taking your shot. And he throws his legs out. He gets up, gets extension, and then hits it. And no criticism, but this is the way it was. I mean, Kerr didn't get him the ball. He just didn't, and he was taking the shots. He had a good night, but Edwards did not. I mean, if you look at the stats in that game against K-State, he and the announcers brought this out. He should be doing this. He should be doing that. I think he was 1 for 9. And, the free throws, miss. That game was won if he had hit those 2 free throws.
Oh,
He would have won. So, but again, I don't, hate to put it this way, but Humpty Dumpty has to be put back on the wall. There's going to be a new slate of players. Who are they going to be? Who's going to be the head coach? And even now we're asking the question, will our athletic director still be there? Will Ren Baker, the rumors going to Missouri, whether that happens or not? So we're just going to have to be patient. I had an exchange the other day with a sports writer, Bob Herzl, and a comment on one of his articles, and said, patience is a virtue. And for West Virginia basketball fans, we have to develop patience. We have to be virtuous, and a lot of us aren't. So see what happens. And the tournament is a new season. A few more games left. We'll see what happens in Kansas City. And as we're seeing, the women are having the same challenges. They were just going gangbusters. I was really shocked they lost to Oklahoma State last night. Oklahoma State has a losing record, but they just they're going to have to get their second breath. I mean, I don't think there's any question about that. Really good team, really good coach. But, you were a coach. It's never the same way all the way through the season from beginning to end.
That's right. It happens. I probably mentioned on the show, my last year coaching, we lost 4 games during the basketball season. One of the games we lost was to a team we played on Wednesday night in the Big Cold Classic, and we beat them by 32 points. We played them on Friday night, 2 nights later, in a regular season game at our place, and they beat us by 2 on a buzzer beater. So you never know. You never know.
Yeah.
You gotta hit your peak at the right time, and anybody can win on any given night. You hear everybody say that. That's more true in basketball than anything. It can happen, and the girls, like they've lost 3 in a row now. Little hiccup here. I think they're going to be fine because they're a good basketball team. And
they are. Boy, they are fun to watch too.
Yeah, you have that. That happens. You mentioned Edwards missing the free throws and that sort of thing. Another thing I noticed about him the other night, there in the overtime, he got good position on the low post. They got the ball into him. Essentially, all he needed to do was turn to his left and lay it in, or dump it, or go up strong and draw a foul. He twisted back around to his right and ended up shooting the ball back over his shoulder this way. And it was awful. He missed it. The guy gets the rebound, and then he just grabbed the guy, and it was his 5th foul. And I'm sitting there thinking, I would just like to ask him, what were you thinking right there? Well, we need to know this so we can get this worked out.
Yeah. Well, that's also coaching. Of course, obviously he's a good player, played at Syracuse, but as Darryl always says, there's an art and science to that low post, and a lot of big men. I mean, a lot of big men have it naturally, and some don't. And so again, patience, and we'll move on to football now. And I
was going to say, I used to say this, Frank, when you said, we were talking about him making that mistake. I said he compounded the mistake by making another mistake. I used to say about some of my players, I say, well, he's awful slow, but he makes up for it by not being able to rebound. So that's kind of where we're at right now. So yeah, hopefully we'll have some patience and
That's
get all
great.
this straightened out. Like I said, there's some talent there, and I know we lose people. And that,
Yeah.
it's going to be different. Year to year, no matter who's coaching, you're going to have different players out there every year. And I think we're going to learn here in just a little bit too how crazy that's going to get. But but I think they really need whether it's Josh Ehlert or somebody else. As soon as the season does officially end, they need to name somebody within that week and get it done, and get them recruiting, get them signing players and that sort of thing to get this on the right track. Because I know a lot of people say it's spiraling out of control, the wheels are falling off, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think so. I think the wheels fell off back last summer. And I think Josh Ehlert has done a good job keeping the car in the road with what he's had to work with and what he's been faced with. And, he's put in an unwinnable position. And I think, for the most part, he has not done a bad job. They played pretty well at times. I just think, again, he hasn't had enough time with the entire team together to work the kinks out. And, it was different players coming in at different times and players hurting out and back in. That's hard to overcome no matter who's coaching when you don't have that consistency and that chemistry building time to get your team together. And, early on in the season, they lost a lot of games to teams they shouldn't be losing to. And then when that happens, that just compounds your problem. Winning fixes a lot of things. You win those games, you're looking at 12, 13, 14 wins, and if you had the team you have right now playing those teams, you'd probably beat them. But back then you didn't have all these players, and then they all come in at different times, and you're trying to get them to gel together and all that. Just a really difficult task for him. I feel for him. Mm-hmm. And but I don't know what's going to happen at the end of the year, but whatever happens, they need to get it done and announce it a week after the season's over. Either they're keeping him or they've got somebody else signed and ready to go, because that'll be the first steps in getting them back in order.
Yeah, I just want to say I just got a text from Darryl. He apologizes, says hello to everyone, but issues came up in his life and he couldn't join us tonight. And he regrets that, but we'll have him back next week.
I understand. All right, let's move on to football now. Something that I know even less about than I do basketball, but we've got a good lineup tonight. Good folks to talk to. Cliff Hill, one of the gentlemen, is going to come and join us, coach. He's down in your neck of the woods. He takes care of players and helps them with their NIL, their scholarships, their offers, et cetera, et cetera. Very interesting conversation I had with him yesterday. I think a lot of people are going to find this topic to their liking, because a lot of people don't know what's going on with NIL and all that. They don't understand how it all works. And there is Cliff as we speak, stepping in. Stone Wolfley also joining us for this football conversation. Again, they're going to talk about football, something I know less about than basketball. So, Frank, I'll let you start the discussion with these guys and get us rolling, and then we'll chime in. We want to encourage everybody else too who are watching that you feel free to step in and make comments or ask questions down at the bottom of the screen, and we'll get those answered for you. So go ahead, Frank.
Yeah, and in fact, we know there's a lot of interest in this subject matter. So when we get into the discussion, I'm going to drop the access link in comments, and if anybody wants to come on the show and ask Cliff, Stone questions, get involved in the conversation, we welcome that. And also, I forgot to mention to you, Greg, too, what I did, and also for Stone and Cliff to know. Since there's a lot of confusion and it's fast moving, not that it's going to stop here. As Cliff will say, it's going to keep on moving. I have a couple visuals that describes the court judgment last Friday, the NCAA's response to it, and then one item I was really shocked at. What legislation is pending right now in Congress with respect to NIL and NCAA regulation? And what's really interesting is the percentage that is accorded the possibility of any of those bills becoming law. And I think you'll be shocked. Maybe you won't at the low numbers on that. But Cliff, we're really pleased to have you with us. You've got a lot of experience. As with Greg, you and I had a great conversation about a week ago in terms of what you're doing for kids, the relationships you have with coaching staffs around the country, helping kids get scholarships and NIL commitments, and also your experiences with those folks who are running the NIL collectives, which obviously are very important in terms of funding. And Stone is you're still on the high school staff, right? You're still a high school coach, Stone. That's what I thought. Is it at Morgantown or University High? I'm sorry, I should know that.
Morgantown High.
That's what I thought. Morgantown High. Great. That's
Careful, Frank.
that was blasphemy.
Yes, sir, be careful.
You tell me I'm not living in Morgantown because they come after me there. You don't know? What are you talking about University High for anyway? But so why don't we start with Cliff? Why don't you introduce yourself, Cliff? Because you're a Boone County native, but are living in Florida now.
I am.
So just go ahead, please. Just introduce yourself and then talk about your work.
Okay, so I grew up in Boone County. I ended up living in Iowa for a couple of years. I coached football in Iowa. I came back and I helped coach football at Logan High School in West Virginia. And then I coached Pop Warner in West Virginia. And then I came to Florida, and I've coached a couple middle school teams in Florida. So I've been around a lot of kids. And the love for the kids is why you do it at those levels. And what I see, I've had the opportunity, a lot of these guys, like I became really good friends with them. It was surprising how many didn't have good support systems at home and a lot of things like that. So the reason I kind of got into this, I kind of fell into it really, but it is ever changing. It changes literally by the day. I heard things on the local Jacksonville sports radio station today that kind of made me rethink where college may be going. But what we don't realize, first off, the reason I decided to help do it now is because with this NIL and the collectives and the way that it's set up, you have all-star businessmen on one hand that are dealing with very naive families that don't know how any of this works. So and there's certain things that you need to do to get in with the schools and to try to put your name out and market yourself. And then if you're good enough to get one of these NIL deals, there's certainly certain things you need to do with that. So it is the Wild West of football right now, like it's never been in our lifetimes. And once this is all settled out, I don't think it'll ever be like this again, but we are smack dab in the middle of it right now.
Great. Fantastic. Now, exactly for the audience, Cliff, the kinds of things you do, who you're working with, you don't have to mention any names, but I do know you've got some players that are very highly ranked nationally, not just for 2025, but also because the 24 year pretty much done in high school, but beyond. But talk about that.
So there's actually, I work with kids and all over the from the just beyond the Mississippi River all the way to the coast. I've not gone out west at all, and I'm very selective in who I work with. I don't want to work with someone to try to convince them that, you know, you're going to get this Division I scholarship to WVU when probably, you know, that's not ever going to happen. So there's things that I look for in these kids. One, and this sounds cliche and it sounds, you know, my wife was a school teacher for years and it sounds like something she'd say, but one of the biggest things they look at is GPA. If the GPA is not there now, they're not interested. And the reason is because that shows they don't have the work ethic that they want them to have and the discipline they want them to have. And then you do look at things, and some of it's unfair. You look at height and weight and 40 times and different stuff like that. And those are some, you can improve all of those things except height with good workout programs. And like, what is their workout ethic? Will they get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and go work out, or are they trying to get a workout in a week? I mean, those things make a difference. So, you know, there's a whole, and I don't solicit people. Everybody I have has came to me, and I've had a lot of people contact me that I just don't, I'm always nice to them. I always make sure that I do give them things that will help them get recruited at whatever level they can get recruited at, but I don't want to make anybody false promises or do anything with that. Most of the kids that I work with, a lot of them already have scholarship offers when I start working with them. So what I'm trying to do is to market them and get them more scholarship offers. Now, I do have a couple of kids right now that don't have any, but I know they will get them. And really, I like to start this process in ninth grade. Ninth grade is when you want to start it. And once you can get some varsity game film, that really opens it up. Like, it's really hard to get anybody to look at anything if you don't have a huddle film. And there's lots of things you can do with that to make it better. For instance, these coaches, I have had the opportunity to meet and talk and sit in their office with some really fantastic coaches and some at some really big time programs, and all of them have been great guys. But these are some of the busiest people in the entire world, and their assistant coaches are some of the busiest people in the entire world. So when you do something like make your highlight video, you want to make sure you put your best play first, your second best play second. And there's things like that that you can do, because if you can get these guys to watch you for 30 seconds, you've accomplished something. So, and then now we live in an age of social media, and social media is important for a couple different reasons. It's important when you get to the NIL part of this, because how many followers you have, and it's an important, very good way to get in contact with teams that you're interested in. And I tell all my guys, you need to contact 60 teams. And this is something I can't do for you. I can help you with your introduction to them. But the best way that I have found so far to do it, one, there's recruiting questionnaires that every college has. You definitely need to go ahead and fill those out. Two, you should email your potential position coach, the recruiting coordinator. You can send it to the head coach. He's probably never going to see it. And then director of personnel. But if you can start with the assistant coaches and just start trying to build a relationship with them, that's a good thing. And it seems like the best way to contact right now, like if you're a kid and you're wanting to get recruited into college and you're good and you could do it, like your Twitter handle should be your name, because that's what these coaches see. And a good thing to do is before, when you're in ninth grade and even 10th grade, before June 15th, they really can't contact you, but you contact them. And a good way to start building a relationship with them is to DM them through Twitter. And then they'll start to follow you. And then you start building your relationship with them then. And probably the very best way to really make a difference is to go to the camps. Like if you're a kid and you want to play for whatever school and you can get out to that camp, I really suggest that highly. One, if you're what they're looking for, you're putting yourself out there, the coaches will see you. And two, so college football is not fair anymore. And you can go to this camp and you can look around and see what's at that camp. And you may say, okay, I may not be a player here, or I may be a player here, and I might need to add these other camps. But I have guys that have multiple D1 scholarships, and I'm having them contact, small schools, even Division II schools. And the reason I do that is because these coaches are moving around nonstop. So, so that's what I kind of do with these kids. And so far it's been working great. We do see scholarships coming in and we see stuff happening. And it's like when people say, well, how many scholarships have you gotten? I've not gotten any scholarships ever. But if you can put these kids in front of somebody and make that connection for them, and then when they get them, you say, okay, Georgia Southern offered you today. Let's send your information to Appy State, same conference. If they see that Georgia Southern got you, Appy State's going to be interested too, or Marshall, or, if you're in the state of West Virginia and you've got these offers, let's send our stuff up to WVU, see what they say. But so that's kind of what I'm doing with them. And the majority of these kids are not getting NIL deals. And if they do, they're pretty small. We see the NIL deals we see are the ones where they get millions of dollars. Yeah. But the majority of these NIL deals are $10,000-$15,000, just kind of enough money to give them something to live on a little bit and things like that. But so that's how I work with them. The way they find me is they'll email me, and usually they get it from somebody that's worked with, and then I will watch their films myself. and I'll go through all their stuff. Like I said, first question I ask is about their GPA. And if everything is in line, then I'll start the process with them.
Mm-hmm. Boy, this
Cliff,
sounds
we'll get-
fantastic. Greg, go ahead, man. Okay.
Yeah, we'll get back to
Stone
Cliff
Red.
in just a minute. I want to ask Stone, because he is coaching high school football, and it's a high level in West Virginia. So I know you have guys probably that are going to be getting scholarships, that sort of thing. What do you guys do, and what do you face as kids are coming in? When I was coaching, we didn't have to deal with any of this kind of stuff. There wasn't anything like that going on. What do you think, as far as high school kids? What do you guys do when they come in, when you recognize the potential to be going to the next level? Is there something that you guys do to kind of help them along with making those decisions?
Oh yeah. So first of all, I mean, everything you said, Greg, or Cliff, you're starting with the GPA. I mean, I tell my kids our kids all the time, you have to go to class. You have to start doing the right things, because these little things that you do, they build up, right? And so when you're going to class, you're turning things in, because what is school after all? Because some of the stuff you learn isn't applicable in the real world, right? So it's
Right.
challenging going here and completing tasks and doing well, and that's what a GPA says: how well you can do different tasks that are presented in front of you, right? And so that's what it speaks for, and that's why you have to work hard. And so that's the first thing we always start with, and we're always constantly on top of them, saying in the study hall and all this and that, and then work ethic too. I mean, I tell them we tell them that only like the top 1% kids go on to the next level, and it's just a reality that we face here. I mean, you deal with a much bigger area, Cliff, than I. I mean, I just deal within the school, and so I'm dealing with, we're seeing a lot of kids try to go D2, D3. We have a lot of multi-sport kids, but first thing we do is we look at their game film, exactly what you said. I always say put your best play first. Try to keep it within 3 minutes, because you want to keep it short. These guys don't have a lot of attention or a lot of time.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so you're constantly trying to. They're like, oh, what about this play? What about that play? And it's like, no, get it out of there. You want to show them that you can, if you're like a receiver, you can catch, that you can block, and you got speed, and you can face certain opponents in certain situations. You have to, and then it's all about what the colleges are looking for, and so you try to tailor some things here and there, but we're just not getting looked at as much as we like, and it's because a lot of D2 schools are actually picking from the portal and not
Mm-hmm.
Picking up high school guys, and so that's something that we're dealing with. They want developed young men, and all we have is brand new green young men. And so trying to contact coaches, trying to exactly what you said. I mean, I try to get a GA-ship, and it's really, really hard. You're constantly emailing, constantly sending out resumes, and it's just a grind. So you have to, like you said, you have to pick 60 of them. You really do to get it out there.
Yeah.
I mean, as far as dealing with NIL or anything like that, we haven't had the opportunity, to set a kid up with that sort of situation.
I know you mentioned them, not the high schools. The high school kids really, I think, in today's climate, are suffering a bit because of all this. And you mentioned the junior college. I know my son's a college basketball coach, assistant coach, and they recruit very few high school kids. They'll take a few, but most of what they're getting are transfers, D1 transfers out of the portal, and those type of things. So it makes it really hard for. I have another son that plays at Williams University, and coming out of high school. I mean, he wasn't. I hope he's not watching, but he wasn't a great basketball player. He was okay. He's tall. He shoots the ball well. He didn't have any offers, and part of the reason was they would say, we're not taking any high school kids. We want we want people that's already played, that are grown men. We don't want to have to develop, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a disadvantage. Really, the high school kids have a real disadvantage. And Cliff and Frank, I'm sorry for jumping in here and taking all the time, but I want to ask Cliff too. We're talking about the high school kids. You hear a lot about some of this filtering down into the high schools now, as far as NIL deals and that sort of thing. Are you seeing that or hearing that where high school kids are starting to, ask for these type of things?
So real quick let's talk about that. When you're talking about the transfer portal, so like the Grove at Ole Miss, that's a really big collective, and I'll explain what a collective is and an NIL is and all that in a second. But they don't even put money into high school kids. They're pouring all their money into transfer portal, which is why they dominate the transfer portal. Right. So because here's the same thing: if you spend $150,000 on a kid or $50,000 on a kid, you want somebody that's going to play. So if you can get a proven commodity that they've already made their name at Murray State or some other school, and you see what they're capable of, it's the same dollars to bring them in. They've already proven they can do 2 years of college, and it does hurt the high school kids. It's unfair. It's almost like there's a situation now to where I know a lot of colleges are recruiting 15 high school kids and 20 portal kids. So that does become unfair. But back to your question about the high school, yes. And so how would I explain this? So it's not the kids wanting money for high school. It's these high schools in the states that it's legal to have NIL deals that are coming after these kids like wolves. And you offer a kid thousands of dollars that has a pretty lean background. It makes it tough. And the thing is, you have to be very careful with all this, because if you take money to go do something at a high school, and you're not supposed to do that, in most scenarios, you're not, unless they're approved through the state and all that. And if you do that, you'll lose a year of eligibility, because what's happening right now, they're bringing in the NIL to Florida high school, and Florida high school has actually fought it. But I think with the pressure of Georgia high school doing it, they're losing a lot of their players to the Atlanta area, because they're paying, they're doing some things that is questionable, for sure, more beyond questionable. But so now I'm watching how they're doing it with Florida. And one of my good friends is an athletic director down here. And he's like, all this stuff is not the way that's not the rules. So they are, and they're not. Here's the thing. So I've sat through some of these meetings on NIL and all that, and you've got some of the biggest collectives in the entire country sitting there telling you how it works. And you have some of the biggest attorneys that have actually set up those collectives and all this. And you ask them a question about legality, and they're like, I don't know. Like, the rules are so unclear. It's like, don't break any rules. Okay, what's the rules? Well, we don't know what the rules are, but make sure you don't break any of the rules. So yes, it is really getting into the high school level, and it will eventually. I think there's only 17 states now that it's not legal at. And I know for sure that, like, it's even happening. They're trying to get some West Virginia kids from other states. So, eventually, West Virginia will, and I think it will kind of be an equalizer for West Virginia too, in a way that you can kind of keep a kid at home, because I've paid attention the last 2 years, and I've seen some of these teams like really load up. So I think it would be a way that little local businesses could promote their own hometown kids and keep them at home. And, the kids like the attention as much or more than the money. So it doesn't
have to be
big money.
Yeah, big problem I see with that. And I coached at Midland Trail High School, which is in a big city by the name of Hyco, West Virginia, where there is no corporation, there's no businesses, there's not anything except woods in Hyco.
Right.
And you go 6-7 miles south and you're at Oak Hill High School, which is a 4A school with a city that has a fairly large population, not big, but so you got that difference in territory in West Virginia where you have some of these rural places. And I used to say this all the time: how am I going to recruit anybody to Midland Trail? I can't, because everybody got accused of recruiting players and that sort of thing. And there was nothing there, and there's no businesses or anything like that. So you see where they would be at a disadvantage. If we had some good basketball teams, I would have lost those players. Somebody was going to offer them money at Fayetteville or Oak Hill or Beckley. I would lose those players. And so I see that. And I know, I'm not get off my lawn guy. I see it coming, and I know it's coming.
Yeah,
and
it is.
They need to, like I told you yesterday, I feel like, and I know our organization, the WVSSAC, will not, just like the NCAA will not. They got to embrace it. They got to figure out how to do it fairly, how to do it properly, and take care of the kids. And I worry, like in West Virginia, that it's not going to turn out that way. And same with the NCAA. I think they'll let the horse out of the barn and then try to get him back in.
Well, and that's what the NCAA did. They were very naive about how this was going to go, and it's shocking, really, how naive they were about it. It's almost unexplainable.
Yeah.
And it's so broken down though right now, and we can talk about this when we talk about where football is going. But they are going to come in, not the NCAA, but they're going to come in and they're going to put some rules and to try to get some organization back to it. It cannot go on like this.
No,
Yep, we'll try to get the water back in the hose. Yep.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, what it's doing, and you experience it, it's just so different. Stone, I can just imagine what it's like when you've got high school sophomore, juniors, and seniors, because football, obviously, for many of them, is a pathway to the future in terms of going to college and being able to go to the college they want and perform. But it puts everybody out at sea, the coaches, the players, everyone. And you're absolutely right, Cliff. If you think about it from a return on investment perspective, and Coach Prime has been probably the most outspoken about this. Why would I recruit a high school kid when I can dip into D2 or another D1 program, and I can look at the person's stats they've performed and give that person the same amount of money that I would give a high school kid on potential? And if you look at, we did this on the show a couple of weeks ago. If you look at the stats for the University of Colorado and look how many they're recruiting out of high schools and how many they're getting out of the portal, I mean, they rank, I think it was number 2 in the country on portal, and like 80th or something like that. I can't remember. We went over it with respect to high school, but that's what he's doing. And then all these coaches now, D1 coaches, all coaches, D2, they've got to re-recruit their kids after spring ball. You could lose your prime players after spring practice.
That's right. That's right. And here's why that is a big deal. And this changes how you can even coach a kid. There is no more old school coaching. And to be honest, I'm sure that's why people like Saban has gone on. I mean, you had Chip Kelly take an offensive coordinator job. You had the Boston College coach jump to the NFL. Like they don't even know how to handle it. But you have to recruit your own guys every year now. And if they have a great season, like this has happened. Kids have gone into the coach's office and they've said, so-and-so is willing to pay me more. Can you match that? If you cannot, I'm leaving tomorrow. That was a story I heard. So, and I know that it's true. And that happens now. And so and that's why I say they have to create some order within the system, because there's turnover.
Yeah, Cliff, you mentioned that, and I can't say these things on I don't want to say these things on the air, but since my son's been involved with college coaching, he's been at a couple of different places, and some of the stories I've heard of some of the things that are said and done, between player and coach and that sort of thing, because I'll say something to the effect, well, if I was coaching, he wouldn't last 5 minutes. You're like, you don't understand that. And then he explains it to me, and I'm like, man, I don't think I am so glad that I no longer coach
Yeah.
in high school. So glad, because I wouldn't want to have to deal with all this. And it just it's changed the whole way things are done. And like you said, the old school coaches, yeah, they don't have much of a chance because these kids are different. You got to treat them different. And I'm not saying it's bad. I'm not saying it's a bad thing. It's just different. And it's not going to go back the way it was. And that's why I say,
right.
gotta
And
embrace it.
the problem with it is, even the NFL, you do not have unrestricted free agency every year. You know what you're bringing back with the majority of your roster. And we are in college football, we are unrestricted, no salary cap, free agency every year.
Right. Yeah. Do you see it going toward something like that? I know you said they were talking about rules and that sort of thing, but I've said all along that, and I've heard some college coaches talk about this, doing it more like the NFL with the divisions and then having salary caps and having contracts and pay minimum salaries, et cetera, and all that. Do you see it heading toward that like the NFL is?
Yes, I do. And I think there'll also be profit sharing and revenue sharing and all that stuff too. And I think that is exactly why a couple of weeks ago we saw the SEC and the Big Ten come together they are the ones going to make the rules. Like, people will think what I'm getting ready to say is crazy. The NCAA is done. It is done. It is over. They've lost too many court cases. They've gave up too much power. And the reason that the SEC and the Big Ten are coming together because they are going to make the rules and they are going to decide where the future of college football is going.
And Frank, I want to throw before I forget this, Frank, I want to throw this in here.
Sure.
And I know you might get it, but I know Stone won't and Cliff probably won't. The NCAA and the SSAC have lost more cases than Edgar Berger. You know who Edgar Berger was? He was the lawyer that always faced Ironsides in the TV show. And Ironsides always won. I figured you'd get that. I thought
I think that's a 1970s television program.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I think Cliff, maybe an asterisk on that. I think there will be a role for the NCAA, and it will be not in major college football. It might still be in major college basketball. I think it will be, but certainly D2 and D3, because the one thing that I would say the NCAA has right is historically the purpose of college athletics is really as an extracurricular activity, and it's based in amateurism. And now amateurism is pretty much in the Olympic sports. And Greg and I have talked about this, and there is more than a few advocacy groups that basically says that the NCAA may be playing stupid, that they know they can't manage the conferences, the major conferences, and maybe on the QT, they're saying go off and organize yourself because we can't manage you.
Well, and I agree with that. And when I say they're done, what I mean is they are done in the way that we've all known them our entire lives. I do believe that they will, if they cooperate with what some of the bigger conferences want to do, that they'll keep them around to try to help them enforce their rules. And I do think, like you said, that they will have more of an impact. And I've heard a lot of other people say that more of an impact at the lower level schools, especially ones that, aren't doing scholarships and things like that. They will still have their place, but to be the one that comes in with the sword and just cuts a program, that's done. That's not going to happen anymore.
Well, I think that's a good transition to look at what happened last week, what the judge ruled on Friday, because it plays right into what Cliff is talking about. And there was a court ruling on Friday. Cliff is talking about, well, there have to be rules, but we know there aren't any rules. And what the judge did with the injunction, now this is not a permanent injunction, it's a temporary injunction. Basically, we're in a no rules environment. People have talked about the Wild West. Well, the Wild West just got wilder. And so here's a summary, 5 points. As background, the NCAA changed its policies in 2021 because of other court cases, including the Alston case. Alston was a running back at West Virginia. to allow college athletes and recruits to earn money through extracurricular means. In other words, NIL, such as endorsement deals and personal appearances. Still, though, the NCAA said back in 2021, not that long ago, universities cannot recruit high school athletes or transfer portal guys using NIL opportunities. Well, Tennessee was the driver in this, University of Tennessee, because they got slapped by the NCAA. And as often happens, they were joined by Virginia, the Commonwealth of Virginia. They basically filed a suit in January 24th saying, no, NCAA, that last part, universities cannot recruit high school athletes with NIL monies as an option. Forget that. And so a U.S. District Court on Friday, a fellow by the name of Clifton Corker, found for the plaintiffs. The plaintiffs were Tennessee, the state of Tennessee, and the Commonwealth of Virginia. He ruled that the NCAA policy banning college recruits from discussing NIL opportunities before they enroll causes irreparable harm, quote unquote, that's from the judge, to student athletes. What he did then, what the state hopes to do now, is to take this temporary injunction, which applies to their states, and make it a permanent injunction. And what they're really hoping for, it'll be national, not just 2 states, that would, again, quote, bar the NCAA from enforcing NIL recruiting ban or taking any other action to prevent prospective college athletes and transfer candidates from engaging in meaningful NIL discussions. Again, this is an important word, before enrollment. And so the preliminary injunction restrains the NCAA from enforcing any NIL compensation restrictions. And what is being said, and I think many people are speculating that the NCAA's attorneys are telling the NCAA, hey, don't touch any states. It's not just Tennessee and Virginia. Just back off completely until this clears. Now, what the NCAA said is that what the court ruling will just make things worse. That's basically what he said. And it will make it a more chaotic environment. And what they're seeking from Congress, and you'll see in a few minutes why I don't think they're going to get what they want, is a limited antitrust exemption so that the NCAA can regulate college athletes and not have to face a lawsuit every other day. Because that's what's happening right now. Not every other day, but every time the NCAA tries to enforce something, it's likely there's going to be a lawsuit filed. And they very much, and why I have asterisks there, they really do not want student athletes to become university employees. We're seeing a lot of unionizing activities at private schools, basically so that if they win, the athletes win in front of the National Labor Relations Board, they would be considered university employees and would be unionized. Some people don't know this. I think a lot of fans don't know this, that some states have passed laws through the legislature that bars public universities from organizing, athletes of public universities from organizing unions. And what the NCAA wants to do is they're punting. They want the Congress to pass legislation to manage NIL and related matters associated with the revenue-generating sports. Federal action may or may not occur, and one of the reasons is you got to get a number of Congress people behind what you're trying to do, and then you got to get it passed. And the problem is a lot of the folks in Congress don't trust the NCAA, and I'll stop with this. Here are several bills that are pending from different senators, from different representatives, and look at the percentage that a company called GovTrack.us that follows bills. What they're saying is the chance of any of these passing, 5% is the highest percent from Senator Murphy out of Connecticut. But three of these have 1% or less. And so Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, is still arguing, we want Congress to act. The question is, will Congress act? And I think that, and I'll pull this off, I think that you're absolutely correct, a cliff. Even though the commissioners of the Big Ten and SEC say all we're trying to do is to do what's right by us. Where are these rules going to come from? They're not going to come from the NCAA, and so what you're right makes a lot of sense.
Well, and here's another problem about that court case that just happened was they're wanting Congress to hurry up and pass this stuff so that they don't have to fight it more. Well, we're in an election year. Like they're not going to take an issue like this on during an election year either.
Right.
So that pretty much guarantees you're going to kick the can down the road for at least a year, but no one that I have talked to thinks it's happening this year for certain. And most of them don't think it's ever happening.
Yeah. And I think, again, you see, when you look at that ruling, basically what they're saying is the NCAA cannot enforce rules pretty much. I mean,
well, and so
they're going to lose in court.
That's pretty much what it is. And
Right.
here's really what that Tennessee ruling does. So before, when you were talking to someone about NIL, if I have a player that's a top guy at his position, top 5, whatever, they can give me a range of what he's going to get per year while he's there. Now, we can't do anything till he gets on campus. Well, guess what? When you get on campus, you have no more leverage, right? Because you're already there. So then they could come in and say, well, and you saw it happen at Florida. Well, this is not exactly what's going to happen now. So what this actually does, it makes it to where like this or not like this, you can be at Tennessee and you can say, I really want to come here. Your facilities are fantastic. And I greatly appreciate now that you've offered me $250,000 a year. But Ohio State is offering me $315,000 a year. And now they're going to have the power to be sitting there with the collective to say, can you match that 315? If we match that 315, will you sign this contract today? Yes. And there you go.
Yep.
So that's kind of what that changed, because now it literally you can do pay to play. That's kind of what that opened up.
Right. And I think too, what we're seeing here, it's going to evolve into, again, talking about the NFL structure where they have a commissioner, but they have a rules committee. The owners have a say in everything. So the commissioner is the top guy, but he can't necessarily rule with an iron fist because there's all these other branches that have a say in what's going to happen. And I think the NCAA is going to get that way where, you can't have that governing body there by themselves that control everything because it's just not fair to everybody. And if everybody has a say in the way it's being controlled, it's a little bit more acceptable that way to the courts, I think. So I think we're going to see that, the other part of it probably is going to be like the NFL as well, the divisions and all that. But I think also the ruling body, a commissioner, whatever the case may be, you're going to have that same setup as the NFL has.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
Frank, you got anything else you want to throw in?
Well, I was going to say first, I will, because we got to talk about the big question, right? Where do we think major college football is going? So we'll turn to you guys for your thoughts. And also I put the link into the comments if anybody wants to join us. But Stone, your observations before we talk about where is major college football going? The biggest question of all, I guess.
Well, I mean, I 100% agree with Cliff. I mean, I think when guys are going to start getting paid salaries, and there's going to be university employees. I mean, it's going to break into the divisions, and it's going to be what the NFL is, essentially, just at a lower level. And not as much going through there, but it's going to be something just like it. Just like the little kid version of it. And I think it's just going to head that way because money always talks, and it's always going to push forward. And so, I hope that NCAA can, do some sort of regulation, because we have to control it at some point. Otherwise, this is going to be completely unfair. And I mean, in order to force something, it has to be enforced all the way around. Like I know as a teacher, if the principal says something, right? And he's enforcing it, enforcing it, but the other teachers aren't enforcing it, then it's going to slip on out. It's going to keep being a problem,
Yeah.
And so as far as, governing rules and, enforcing them, it has to be unified across the board.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that always tickled me about it when I would hear people when this all started saying, well, it's going to create some real issues in that locker room if you have a guy that came in as a wide receiver and he's making more money than the right tackle, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm like, you don't think, Patrick Mahomes makes more money than the left tackle for Kansas City? I was like, he's the best player, so they're going to pay him. And I said, that's the way it's going to be in college. Your best players are going to make the most money. That's just the way it is.
That's right.
And that's life. That's the way it is.
That's right.
At that level, it's like professional, right? Where you're mature, you understand your role and your position.
Right.
Like high school or in college, you're dealing with a lot more maturity.
Well, and one of the difference with that is too, you may have a quarterback getting $1 million and you may have a right tackle not really getting anything.
Right.
So
that's why I'm saying eventually when the pay starts, it's going to be, everybody may get paid, but everybody's not going to get paid top dollar, what I mean? Unless they structure it that way.
Well, because they're overpaying right now, really.
Right. Exactly.
That's right. That's right.
Hey, we have some other folks join us. Yeah.
Yeah, we got a couple guys join us. Kenny, you have a proposal. Do you want to share that with our two coaches? And go ahead. Actually, three coaches. So go ahead.
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank all of y'all for coming on and giving a great show. Y'all are doing a fabulous job. I like each and every one of you, and I think y'all are very informative. And so, yeah, what about having all of the high school teams in all the states of the Big 12 and have them to come up with the college, with all the college presidents and things, and come up with inside their system to have a high school playoff at the end of the season with all different states of the Big 12 in order to help the college students with their PFF grade and to help them with the NIL.
Cliff,
Coach, what do you think? Yeah, go ahead, guys. Respond.
So I'm not sure how that would work and how it would be organized if you could pull something like that together, and here's my outlook on it all. Anything that helps the kids, like all this stuff I do, I've never charged a penny. I don't charge anyone. So anything that will help these kids get noticed, recognized, and get to where they want to be, because I see it here in Jacksonville. There's a lot of kids, because of grades or one reason or another, that would start at a lot of colleges in the country, and they don't even ever get to college. So anything that you can do that would help promote the kids and get the kids better opportunities, like you were saying with doing that in football, I would be all for it. I just would have no idea how to organize it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, couldn't you do a Big 12 network format and put them games on with it to where it would not only generate money for our conference but also for the high schools as well, where they need it.
Yeah,
I think if you could pull something off like that, it would be great.
Yeah,
and any way that you can get the kids looked at and for all their hard work and get them, in a position where they want to be, I think is fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, for years there's been the Pennsylvania-Ohio end of season game, and I think universities are going to have to figure out you can't do it yourself, you can't do it alone. You got to have partners, and that would be a great way to. Obviously, these players coming from high school would be great. Kelly, do you have a question? Kelly McCourt's one of our great regular listeners and viewers. Kelly, do you have a question or a comment?
No, I just wanted to say hi to Stone, and I really enjoy y'all's shows that I watch here on Then and Now.
Hey, Kelly, thanks for coming on, man. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, buddy.
Kelly, Kelly's one of our faithful watchers. He's there with Kenny both. They're always there making comments, have a lot of good insights. We appreciate you guys.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
Kelly's a great person, and also Mike Dunlap is on tonight. Mike, good to have you with us, and it's because of Mike made the connection. Talk about networking with Coach Hill. So yeah, it's networking. Well, you guys stay on, and anybody else want to join us, you can too. The big question, and we'll end with this, is where do you think major college football is going to go, restructuring and all that kind of stuff? Why don't we start with you, Cliff? We talked about it. You and I. You have some real insights that are grounded, and I know Greg talked with you about this too. Where do you think we're going to be in 2 to 3 years with the conference structures and how major college football is going to look in 3 to 5 years or whatever?
So as soon as they were allowed to make it about money, it became about money. And so parity is not at the top of the list of things that they're trying to keep relevant in college football now. So I have said, and I've thought this for over 2 years, and when Texas and Oklahoma shifted to the SEC, I said they're gonna put all these teams together and they're gonna break away. And I was on vacation, and I was listening to when USC and Oregon and all these guys started coming in. I said, it's happening. I kept telling my wife, I said, this is what I've been telling you, but she doesn't care at all about any of that. But, I was still telling her. And so I think, and here's another reason why I think it, Florida State has already said they're willing to pay like $150 million to leave the ACC.
Wow.
The ACC wants $500 and some million. I have read and heard, and they think that number is going to be in the 200s, maybe, to get them out of there. And as soon as they leave, they're not paying that because they just want to change conferences. They're paying that because they want to be part of that Big Two. I personally think they're going to go to the Big Ten. So I think you're going to see Florida State, and I think Notre Dame is finally going to have to join a conference, as bad as they're going to hate it. But I think you're going to see the Big Ten and the SEC kind of break away and do their own thing. I mean, the writing's kind of on the wall. Now, we don't know, are they going to be inclusive? Because there's some great schools out there that are not in those two conferences, and you can divide those up and put them in more of a regional format. Like if you took the ACC and the Big 12, you could divide them into a group of 4. And like I wrote it down the other day, and like, some of the conferences out west would be Arizona State, Stanford, Cal, Utah, BYU, Colorado, Boise. You pick up somebody like that. That's a lot of great football. And the East could be like Cincinnati, Pitt, WVU, Louisville, NC State, Boston College, Syracuse, Virginia Tech. So you've got that many more to put in other places. So I don't think that they would ever make it to where you can't. I think what they would do is say, okay, here's the rules. And if you want to play, then this is what some things you're going to have to do to maintain if you want to, because you've got teams like Vanderbilt. Why is Vanderbilt in the middle of all that? So you've got some teams there that if you make some guidelines and rules, I can still see that there could be some shuffling. If West Virginia, is a team that they would have to look at. Oklahoma State's a team they're going to have to consider. Those two teams are far and away better than Indiana, Vanderbilt, Northwestern, a lot of things like that. And it's not, so they're going to want to condense the power and condense the money. And that's where we're headed. But I don't think that is the total. I know you have fans, it's like it's not going to happen. And you have 50% of fans, it's like it's going to ruin everything. And I don't think it's either one of those. I don't think it's going to be this or that. I think those two conferences are going to kind of do their own thing. And I think, but you'll still have a chance, because today they talked about going to a 16-team playoff. Well, that kind of changed my thinking, because I thought, well, if they're talking about doing 16-team playoffs, they could still plug in 5 from the Big Ten, 5 from the SEC, and still include. But see, one thing that a lot of people don't realize, if you crunch the numbers, 74% of fans if Florida State jumps to one of those conferences and Notre Dame does. 74% of all college football fans would now fall in those two conferences. So that's so, and when you look at money, it becomes even more exponential. But I do think there's still going to be the ability for people to shift around and move around. And I think there's still going to be great football. I think it's going to become a lot more geographically based the way it used to be, which is great. You get rivalries, you care who wins your conference, you do all those things. And then, you still play a great brand of football and you still get great TV contracts. And I don't think it's the skies falling necessarily, but I do think that those two conferences are going to really go into the driver's seat.
Yeah. Great thoughts. Reactions, guys.
Stone, go ahead.
I mean, I would love it. I would absolutely love it if it went into the regional area or with divisionally, because you bring in cross-town teams. Like I'll tell you, from Morgantown High and University High, like that is a huge game. That is a huge game every year. Basically the whole town shows up, and so geographically, you make it more personal, which will bring in a lot more money, in the long run. So it may not be as big, but I don't think that it's gonna, like Cliff said, like the sky's falling. I think the other teams and other conferences are going to make it out just right, as long as we organize accordingly and based off of region and all that other stuff. But I agree with Cliff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the the regional thing will be appealing to a lot of folks, West Virginia fans, and because one of the big things a lot of folks here still fuss about is the fact we don't get to play Pitt as often, or Penn State, or whoever the rivalries are, and everybody wants to see that. That's what we want to see. I think we're headed toward more of an NFL structure. I've said that already. You're going to have those two big conferences, true. But I think, like Cliff said, when you look at these other teams, there's some really attractive football out there. And I think, the way the NFL has looked at it over the years is that we're all going to benefit more if we're all together. And I think when you look at Oklahoma State, West Virginia, some of these bigger, name teams, these conferences will look at those guys and say, if we include them in the mix, it's going to be more money for all of us. So I think eventually we're going to get to that divisional type thing, broken up regardless what the conferences look like. The division structure, like we do in the NFL with a playoff within the divisions, and then a conference division, or a conference championship, and then a Super Bowl, if you will. And I think the money, the pay for players. Somebody commented there just a second ago. Haven't heard any talk about collective bargaining or anything like that. Well, I've heard that talk. I've heard them talk about collective bargaining. Yeah, when salary compensation happens, are they students or employees? No one's really mentioning collective bargaining agreements and unions, and attempt to keep Congress in check. I think people are talking about collective bargaining agreements and unions, and I think that's coming as well. And I think you're going to have, just like in NFL, you're going to have player representatives, you're going to have owners, so to speak, which will be presidents. So I think that's where it's all headed. I think, when the dust clears, we're going to be aligned like that. And again, that's just my opinion, but just based on what you're seeing, it's just hard to imagine. I mean, you can see the Big Ten and the SEC being the dominating force. A lot of really good teams there, but it's just hard to imagine that, you're going to leave out WVU, you're going to leave out Oklahoma State, you're going to leave out Miami, you're going to leave out Florida State, whoever else. We could mention 50 of them, but it's just hard to imagine that those guys get left out, because there's still TV contracts. There's still a lot of money to be generated by all these other teams, and it's just hard to imagine that they kind of get left on the outside. And again, just my opinion.
Yeah, good thoughts. Kenny, do you have any observations about this that you want to share?
Yes. I have also followed, and I want to say rip to Golden Blue Dude, because he's been right about a lot of his realignment things. I've sat here and I've watched for the past couple of years, and I've seen when we were independents and left the big East and then come here. I've seen a lot of realignment things with this. So I really believe that we're going to a three big conference setting. I think there's going to be 24 teams in each conference. And I really believe that each conference will have 4 slots, and that would leave four for at-large bids. That, right, to me, it makes the most sense.
Yeah,
Well,
I think it's all going to be money driven. We know that, and obviously know that. So I think again, once it settles, I think the money is going to be the driving force, and it'll shake out accordingly where the dollars are.
Yeah, I was thinking about this today. Right now, the system is contoured where everybody's trying to be like Ohio State, but there are very few schools that are like Ohio State. Vanderbilt, you brought up Cliff. I mean, I'm of an age, so I remember when the Southwest Conference went kaput, and but all of those teams didn't stay in power. What we know now is Power Five. Rice, Houston, TCU, they really went into what we call now Group of Five. I mean, TCU was bailed out by the Big 12 when all the teams left, when Colorado and Texas A&M left, et cetera. And it helped TCU get back. But it took all these years for Houston to get back. Rice has never gotten back. That doesn't mean they don't play good football. And I'll tell you what, I feel I would have died and gone to heaven if we had a regional makeup the way we had when I was growing up, where every year West Virginia played Pitt. They played Syracuse. They played Penn State. That's probably that's a different cat now. But Boston College, et cetera, Tech. That's good football. So, this has been an absolutely fantastic conversation.
Sure has.
Kick it back to you, Greg. I'm looking. We have time, but we want to close by having Stone talk about what happened last Saturday.
Yeah, we talked about it, and now Stone has experienced it. So we want to hear all about the polar plunge. Stone, tell us about it. We read about it. We want to hear it from somebody that was there.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what. First of all, it was cold. Second, it was really cold. No, but I agree. Going up to it, and I was like, okay, maybe it's not so bad, because last time I got sick, I got pneumonia. Well,
oh my God.
That morning I woke up and my backyard was covered in white powdery snow. I'm like, great, this is awesome. Yeah. So it was a great turnout, man. I mean, so many people showed up. What everyone was saying, freezing for a reason. But man, that water was icy.
I saw some pictures.
But we were very blessed because Team Wolfman ended up earning the most donations, and that was thanks to your guys' efforts and through this show and all the amazing West Virginians and Mountaineer fans that participate in it, because after all, I mean, it is really important. These kids get an opportunity, to compete, which they may not have had in the past. So I think it's really good. I think it's really important because because what I said that Saturday was sports translates to life. That's why we coach it. That's why it's so important, in our culture, because in almost every culture, just because these are minuscule, tiny lessons that you can learn on a football field, where it would be detrimental in real life. Right?
There's a question for you, Stone. Can they can still do the GoFundMe? Kelly's asking, right? I think the GoFundMe that is still up, right?
I think it might have been closed, but I mean, it doesn't hurt to try.
Yeah. And I'm thinking at the very least you could send a check to West Virginia Special Olympics in the name of Dale Wolfley. I mean, you can always do that, Kelly and others. A number of us contributed, and we're pleased to do that. And I want to say, Coach Hill, this was fantastic. Thank you so much, Ken, for being there. Stone, as always. I'll kick it to Greg, and he'll take us home.
Thank you.
Cliff, Stone, appreciate you. Cliff, appreciate you. And Frank, so you'll know, I got a very special guest on the Courtside with Coach Chris show tomorrow night. Let's see. that way. Cliff's going to join me on the show tomorrow night. I asked him on the
That's
phone
great.
about him doing that. So I'm stealing him. So yeah, he's going to be on the show tomorrow. But fascinating conversation, guys. I've enjoyed it. I know I start rambling on and have all my thoughts and my opinions, which I always think are the correct ones, but it's nice to hear from somebody that actually does know, and to get all this insight into how the NIL works and where it's all headed. And like right now, Cliff, I know, I was thinking about it and I thought, man, I bet you his head's spinning. But at the same time, I'm thinking, I bet he really is enjoying it.
No, I've had a blast.
Whole world. Yeah.
No, it's good because I spent all this time trying to figure this out, to help these kids and to get to tell people about it. I've enjoyed it. It's been great.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And this court ruling opened up the whole world. So it should be interesting for a while until they corral it all back in. So anyway, we appreciate everybody listening. Kenny, we appreciate you coming on. Kelly, we appreciate you. Timothy, all you guys that contribute to the show, we appreciate you very much. For everybody out there watching, we thank you. And again, we want to ask you to make sure you subscribe and like us on YouTube. That helps us a great deal. And I look forward to talking to you tomorrow night on the Courtside Show. Frank, always a pleasure. Stone, Cliff, appreciate you guys as well. Thanks for watching, everybody. Good night.
Thank you, guys.